All right, well, welcome back to another episode of Unlearn with us. I am super excited to have for a second time. This is round two for us because in my first attempt at interviewing Don, things messed up, and thankfully he knows all about it and is welcome or is willing to come back and do it again. So, visiting with me today is Don Wettrick. I met Don through Twitter, I think in the beginning, I can't remember, but then it was probably about 3 or 4 years ago and started listening to the Started Up podcast and I was hooked. Don, and I'm going to get him to go into detail about the stuff that he's done in the education world, has been a huge part of what I've done, has given me the courage to move forward and make changes. And I definitely would not be where I am today without crossing paths. And I'm so fortunate to be able to call him a friend now. So welcome, Don.
Hello.
Awesome. So good to see you in your shiny, it's so shiny back there in your co-working space. It must be all windows.
Yeah, it's a lot of glass. We've got a small office and yeah, making it all glass is both interesting and get to know your neighbors pretty well. But
Yeah,
yeah.
you definitely don't want to be caught picking your nose.
That's
Anyway,
why I
so
get here a lot of times at 5 a.m., which
there
is
you go.
I'm the only one here. That's when I pick my nose.
Yeah, perfect. Get it all taken care of. So tell us, Dawn, about who you are, where you are, what you're doing.
Yeah, so I taught for 21 years, and probably why I'm talking to you today is I had started a class called Innovation and Open Source Learning several years ago. And really it started with an email, and it was an email from a friend, and it said, watch this. And it was a link to Dan Pink's TED Talk. And I'll always remember it because I watched it during my lunch break. And because I wasn't diagnosed with ADD, but I'm pretty sure I've got it. I'm like, I like shiny objects. And I watched that and I was like, this is really cool. And I was like, why don't I do this in school? And there wasn't a Genius Hour back then. There wasn't a 20 time back then. And I'd say most people would agree that Dan Pink was kind of the godfather of like kicking this off. And so that very next period, I showed it to my students and I'm like, why don't we do that? And it took off in ways I didn't expect. And I ended up writing a book about it and did better than I expected. And long story made short, I ended up also starting with, I had my students start reaching out to entrepreneurs and authors, and that seemed to really resonate with a lot of people, especially my students. And gosh, that also took a life of its own and kind of created new opportunities and pathways for us.
Awesome. Yeah. So I want to delve deeper into that because, like I said, a lot of what I'm doing and a lot of what I did in my classroom was a result of listening to you, listening to what you did, but also a lot of what you brought onto your podcast. I was inspired by so many of those entrepreneurs and other teachers to make what I was doing sort of my own. And kind of took snippets from here and there. So I want to hear more about the innovation and open source learning. So if I'm a teacher, where did it begin? I know you watched the TED Talk, but how did you make it happen in the classroom?
Like anything, trial and error, and then reflection, and then adjusting. You know, I think this is the biggest misconception and maybe the biggest hamstring of people that do Genius Hour is like, hey, go be geniuses. And then it's just open time and there's no metrics, there's no goals, no anything. So, you know, it started off like a lot of other things, like a Genius Hour, right? So when I started it at the high school, I was like, you know, hey, next Friday, I'm going to give you 45 minutes to do what you want to do. And that was an unbridled mess. And that's okay, because I realized that it is a culture difference. And, you know, when you're in school to do compliance and jump through a hoop and get an A, you're going to get exactly that. And so, you know, I led the horse to water, but I just didn't make them thirsty. So with some pivots and with some changes, I'd found that I was hitting a striking nerve with some of my students. And so I ended up like asking my school, 20 minutes, 30 minutes on a Friday isn't cutting it. which is why I like Genius Hour up to high school. And at the high school level, it just needs more time. So I end up writing this class called Innovation and Open Source Learning. And that is a nice way of saying innovation. So the first 6 to 7 weeks, I taught you to think for yourself. I taught you how to backward design things, how to use tools like an Asana or a Trello or a Monday.com or whatever. I taught you how to, really harness social media, especially I'm a bigger fan now of LinkedIn. When you treat yourself like a professional online, other people will treat you accordingly. Things of this nature, some design thinking, just some warm-up activities on creativity, and then delving into what innovation is and how it's different from creativity. And then from there, it was open source learning. Open source learning in the sense that there's a lot of things that I don't know how to do, but that's okay. We can open source that. And then quite frankly, I was always inspired by people saying, you know what they should teach in school? And then they would talk about things that weren't taught. I was like, okay, let's do that then. So if it's, so some parents like, well, they should need to, teach kids how to manage money. Awesome. If you want to learn about money management, there's better people out there than me. Although I do know my money management. I'm a big fan of financial planning.
I've heard it.
Oh man,
Yeah.
do I love financial planning. But you open source that.
Yeah.
So school then becomes, instead of a compliance center of learn trigonometry. Why? Because we've always done it that way. To, what? I've always wanted to learn how to, invest in cryptocurrencies. How do you do that? I have no idea. Let's go find people that do. Well, that's a different thing. That's learning. It's not compliance. And so the class, and by the way, it was an unbridled mess for some. For some that just wanted an A, they would go through the motions and pretend like they were busy, kind of like George Costanza when he had that job with the Yankees. But for those that wanted to learn and acquire skills, it took off. And, I just wanted to shout from the mountaintops, this is working. And then under my breath say, for some, it still was it was a struggle. But I see people though right now, really starting to question why school. What is the purpose? Is the purpose there to be socialized? Yes, and that's okay. Is the purpose there to learn things? Yes. Okay, what is now the big topic, and why? There are some things, like I think school up to about 6th and 7th grade is great. Heck, I think kindergarten is wonderful. But after that, you start looking at why we offer what we offer, and it's time to re-question those things. And my favorite bit of rhetoric is when I go to schools, I'm like, what is the purpose of school? And I hate the pass the buck mentality. Oh, it's to get them to college. Okay, what's the point of college? To prepare them for the world or to prepare them for jobs. Okay, how is what you're doing preparing them for jobs, and what jobs are available? Those questions make people real and they make people uncomfortable. But unless we're having those discussions, and if we're truly about preparing kids for the future, you must understand what the future is. You must become a futurologist. So if you take a look around on what we're changing and how we're changing, just making kids memorize things for the sake of memorization. And by the way, there's some things that are okay to memorize. Like, I loved music lyrics that spoke to my soul. I think that some people like to memorize Bible verses that speak to their soul. I think that some people like to memorize dates so it's ingrained in them. So I'm not saying all memorization is bad, but the sake of just memorization and just knowing it and parroting it back and saying, you must be smart, is over. You can Google things. Now people are looking for skills. They're hiring for skills. End of story. So unless you're acquiring skills, it's not preparing you for the future, which was the most correct answer people could say, to prepare kids for the future. Well, let's start looking at that.
You had a guest on, and I always make reference, and I always forget his name. I'm pretty sure it was an Italian last name. He was I don't know if he was a college professor, but he talked about the learning for right now, or what was it called?
Just-in-time learning.
Yes, just in time. And we do so much just in case learning. And right. It so resonated with me, right? It was just, I get that it's important to expose kids to different things. Um, but there's so much time spent on, well, you might need this,
Right.
right?
Well, and it doesn't take into account what you're already good at.
Yeah.
So much of life can literally be looked through the lens of a sports metaphor, whether that's like training for the Olympics or a superstar. So let's just say LeBron James tested very high in basketball. So he doesn't need to practice basketball anymore. He's already tested high. What he really needs to work on is his golf game. So we should put LeBron into remedial golf so he can be a good golfer. Why? And don't get me wrong, I think a nice, like, once you show proficiency, then you should really start working towards mastery. Identify what kids are good at, to force the square peg in a round hole and say, hey, if you want to get into a really good college, take more calculus. I'm not going to go into calculus. I'm going to go into communications. Well, you're already good at communications, so let's polish up on, like, that strategy is really silly if you think of it through the sports metaphor. And I know this is a little bit of apples and oranges, but like, again, if you're taking it, it's an opportunity cost. If
Yeah.
you're taking up hours of things that you're never going to do in your life, you're costing them the opportunity to become better at what you're already good at.
Yep. Yeah. And I feel like I always hear, well, I need to keep my options open. Mm, we're frozen.
Why can nothing be easy today?
It's all good. I can cut that. I can cut it out.
Well, I mean, so now I'm on a non-good microphone, and
Oh,
I don't know what happened, but all of a sudden, I mean, if I sound okay, I'm going
you
to try
sound
to switch
fine.
back. Okay, that was really bizarre,
Yeah, I
but
don't.
but at least I ended my thought.
Yes. Well, I don't have your face now though.
Oh shoot,
Well, I have your face with a bunch of little black boys.
hold on. Oh, that's me in Ghana. Oh, there I
There
am.
you are. Okay. All right. Okay. So we'll pick. I'll start a new question here.
Okay.
Um, So going back to the innovation and open source learning, like I said, when I've been, and I'm still doing, right, trying to figure out what I'm going to do with my kids, I'm always looking for inspiration. I'm always looking for other people who have done really cool things. Who were your inspirations? I know Dan Pink, obviously, but did you pull from anybody else, or did you create this on your own?
As far as in education,
Yeah,
uh, within the first 2 years, no, nobody. In the sense that I think there were some people that were starting around the same time, and then I discovered them later. Um, oh gosh, his name is going to elude me. Oh, I feel terrible. He's in California, and he ended up starting like hashtag 20 time. Um, oh, I'll remember it here in a second. And then later on, AJ Giuliani, Paul, um, my 48-year-old brain sometimes. But yes, there were some.
yeah,
There were some that I discovered later on after like starting this for a couple of years. But to be fair, like no one was really doing what we were doing. They were doing genius hours,
right.
and that's great. That's great. Um, but no one had their own innovation and open source learning class. That's for sure.
Yeah,
So um, yeah, we kind of resonated with that.
awesome. So okay, so you wrote Pure Genius. So that's the book that you made reference to. And I think in the last time we were talking, I had been listening to your podcast for a couple years at this point, and I was talking to somebody else who had listened to your podcast, and I was just like, ah, man, I just wish there was a like a roadmap for this. Like I'm pulling and piecing all this together, and I just want somebody to, have a binder that I can open up and say, okay, step 1, do this, step 2, do that. And I just could not find it anywhere. And she was like, well, have you read Don's book, Pure Genius? And I was like, no. Anyway, so downloaded it that day, and it's a roadmap for doing this type of thing. So how did that, like, it was that sort of once you you kind of figured out what worked or whatever, and is that how you put it together? Is that, or how did that come together?
Yeah, I was really pleased because I was shocked with the fact that there was an interest. I ended up getting offers from different publishers, and the one that gave me the most creative freedom is who I ended up going with. And really what I just wanted to do, like, I'm a huge fan of reflection, right? So I think that you learn when you do something, but then you look back on it and say, okay, what did I do right? What did I do wrong? Being very transparent in what you did wrong, knowing that it's a journey and you can do better. So just writing that book was cathartic, but I just wanted it to read like an open journal. I was really honest with myself. And in the book, I put in there that I came across like a huge ass. I was so focused on my students that, probably the hardest part of the book was I admitted, I'm like, look, it was almost an apology, is that when I first started this, I wasn't collaborating with any other teacher. I was looking out for my students and my opportunities. So when I had these awesome people Skype in, we had some A-list people Skype in. I wasn't inviting anybody other than my kids. I could have started to invite other teachers and say, hey, do you want to listen to this chemist, or do you want to listen to this brain researcher, or people like that? Or, hey, do you want to listen to Dan Pink, who would Skype into class? I eventually learned that and learned to open up those avenues. But those kind of lessons I put in the book, and even like little tidbits of what worked for me on social media, and then just what I was seeing in my students on what worked and what resonated with them. So by no means was I trying to make it a recipe, rather than this is what worked for me. This is what resonated with my students. And I'm trying something here that, quite frankly, I wasn't being done anywhere else.
Yeah, I recommend that book to anybody who is trying to change things up. All right, so you talk about some of the people that you had come in and Skype in and have some conversations. Obviously, in the beginning, well, maybe not obviously, but I'm assuming when you start to reach out to the community, to people, to kind of like that open source part, what was that like? I think there are a lot of people who look at this and go, well, that's a lot of work, and who's gonna wanna work with us. How did that all start? And did you have the big people in the beginning?
No, but yes. It turns out Dan Pink is an extraordinarily kind person. And I just think like the mission of what we were doing resonated with some people. So if I have to go down a list, I'm gonna forget one name, so it already eludes me. But I contacted Dan and said, hey, that TED Talk you do, I'm gonna try to change it to its own class. Got his attention. That may have been luck, I don't know, but that helped, because then that made other people go, wait, what are you doing? Why is he responding to you? Tina Seelig at Stanford, who was probably my innovation muse, she got back with us. So those, in my opinion, another professor at Duke, his name eludes me, but I started just reaching out, and it bothered me when I got well, it's easy for you to say, you have a blue check mark. I didn't back then. I had 20 followers. It's just that we were on a mission that mattered. And quite frankly, I had been teaching for 10, 11, 12 years. If you've been teaching for 10 years, you know how many families you know? And those families know people. And sometimes our kids wanted to open source learn and just learn from a guy who owned a blah, blah, blah in Franklin, Indiana. Awesome. I can put the word out. So some of it wasn't even social media reaching out. It was just like people heard what we were doing, and some people, and usually entrepreneurs, because entrepreneurs love learning, just not to be told what to do kind of learning. And that was also a huge help for us. So, to this day, I cringe when people, try to dismiss what we, who we got to talk to because, oh, well, it's easy for you. No, actually it was. It was. It was easy because we asked.
Yeah.
So if you're saying that you could never, and by the way, we got thousands of no's. Yesterday, there was a teacher who tagged me, and they were trying to get an actress to get, back to this one student. I don't know if it worked, but I didn't see anything happen. That's fine. It didn't work. They can keep at it, and I recommend that they do. And if they don't get back to them, screw it. Choose somebody else. And a lot of times, that person that helps you will amplify what you do, whether they're a celebrity or not. But that person that did help you, the people that are in their inner circle see that, and then the people are it's that stair step effect. So, sorry, I'm rambling, but that was
No, I think that's really important because I get the same thing. Not that people think it's easy for me, but I think there's a lot of people who are really uncomfortable asking for help or asking people, and I have had nothing. I mean, there are people, like you said, that say no or maybe don't even get back to me or whatever. I don't get offended. People are busy. People have lives, whatever. But when I get the person, that wants to hear what we're doing and wants to work with the kids, like, it's amazing. And like you said, it's just a trickle effect. Yeah. Awesome. All right. So if a teacher wants to make some changes, what's some advice that you have for them?
Well, I mean, again, I quote him so often, and actually I heard from him yesterday, so maybe it's top of mind. My favorite quote about education is from Seth Godin. Education can be boiled down to two things: solving interesting problems, and then the leadership to get it done. What interesting problems are you solving in your class? And if you're not, what are you doing? Well, I'm teaching them to read. All right. Is there a problem there? Is there something you can solve? I'm teaching math. What interesting problems are you solving? Because students love the challenge. If you're just doing it because you said so, you didn't like that as a kid, but you don't like it now. And then the leadership to get it done is I'm just a huge fan of leadership. Matter of fact, I'll give a lesson. This is something that I was really, I played this for my students in class, and I'm going to bring up Seth again. But when we recorded the podcast, he's like, okay, I want you to do this with your students, Don. He said, have the room, just be really quiet. And everybody has like some slips of paper in front of them. And then Seth goes, okay, with the people in the room right now and nobody else, your favorite organization, whether that be a church, whether that be a club, but your favorite organization is going to implode and die unless something is done. And the people that have to get it done are in this room. Write down 3 names of people that that can save this organization. And you may put yourself on that list. And so my students did. And they wrote down 3 names quietly, and I put them in a hat, and I passed them around. I ended up reading them. Of the 27 kids, there was only 6 names. And I kept reading them. And I said, okay, and this is what Seth said. He says, how many people put your own name? Only 4 hands went up. And I asked them why, and they go, because I'm awesome. I get things done. When I'm in a group project, I'm the one that gets it done. Everybody else watches me. And then Seth goes, okay, ask them this. If you didn't write your name down, when are you going to be the person that that you could count on? You wrote down somebody else's name is going to save you in your favorite organization. When are you going to be that person? That's wake up time, baby.
Yeah.
That's my favorite thing in the world, because who's going to save you? You. If you're going to put the power in somebody else's hands, good luck. And I think that that's where we're at right now in the current state of affairs. If you're hoping that someone is going to save you, good luck.
Right.
Your personal needs are your responsibility. Now, don't get me wrong. I love a government that keeps us safe and blah, 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 and this and that. But you think that I'm going to put my family, you think that I'm going to put my well-being in the hands of somebody else? That's silly. So my students that everybody agreed on, they're like, I'm counting on this person. Everybody knew it. And the ones that didn't write their name kind of looked blankly and went, wow. Mm-hmm. That is what I love. Yeah. So that is maybe something that any teacher can do. Do that in class. I think it's a mental wake-up call.
Yeah. Awesome.
So solving small problems. And then, so even if there is an agreed upon problem in the class, who would you count on to really create a solution for this? Have a poll. Have them write down names.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That'll definitely be an eye-opener. So I don't know what, I think you guys have gone back to school. We don't go back until September. I know you guys go kind of mid-August. So our government, that oversees education, is still up in the air with what's happening, and it's a little uncertain. But I mean, the one thing that is 100% is that there's going to be some online. There's going to be a lot of flexibility. There's going to be some in person. There's going to be, it's going to be different. Do you think that this is a good time for teachers to start to think about how they might do things different? And do you think it's going to happen?
You have to. This is the one thing I see. This is what gets me in trouble. Innovate or die. With every other industry in the world, it's innovate or die. And if we keep clinging to, well, we always did it this way, does the rest of the world do it the always way? And so if you're not thinking about what you're doing, how you're delivering it, and what is the end value, it's innovate or die. And by the way, I put some of the ownership on the parents and on the colleges too. I was just listening to a A16Z podcast, and they're having this debate on, is ed tech helpful or is it destructive? Well, it's both. And ed tech is just the tool. If it's making you feel obsolete, then why? Why is that? Or is what you're offering obsolete? If you said no, okay, then it's the delivery system. So if you have something of value and you see a problem like the students aren't going to be there in person, you're going to have to, it doesn't matter what you want to do. The reality is that this is the new reality, and it's going to be an eye-opener for a lot of people. Now, is it going to be perfect? No. But once again, if you reflect on your practices, now on the other hand, you're also going to have some parent groups and some people at large are going to have some empathy. No teachers have a degree in epidemiology. No one's an infectious disease expert. So we're going to try to figure this out the best we can. I just hope that there is a willingness to try different things. I hope that there is a willingness to have a dialogue. I hope there's a willingness from parents to not trash everything that is new. I hope there's a willingness from students to not go, this is dumb, but to try new things and reflect on it.
That's awesome. My last question was what do we need as a society to really embrace in order to move forward? But I think, like you said there, it's being open-minded and being flexible and having that empathy. Anything else that you think that?
Well, and then a national discussion on why do we teach what we teach? And I think that there's a lot of opportunity to say a lot of what we do is good. There's no throw the baby out with the bathwater for me. A lot of what we do is good, but I think that there should be some time in the school day that you do have time. I selfishly think that at the high school level, at least, a class like what we're talking about is needed. That is the class where you're like, I've always wanted to look into cryptocurrency. Now's the time. I've always wanted to learn how to, kayak. Now's the time. There's that one time of the day, because if it's important to you and you're acquiring a skill,
I think that's eventually people are going to figure out that is the most selfish part of the day, because you had all this time during the regular day to acquire baseline skills. And then you have this one time of the day, innovation, open source learning, genius hour, 20% time, to have the skills that you want to acquire that are specifically tailored to you.
Yeah,
It's a selfish time.
I think that there's also this sort of misconception of what learning is, right? And that I know for myself, as I made the transition to sort of more of that experiential learning, that outreach to community. Well, now my kids are not writing tests. Now my kids are not writing, academic papers. So I struggled with that in thinking that they're not learning, when in reality, they were learning and are learning so much more than just that one skill. Like you said, they're learning so many skills.
Yeah.
So I think that just wrapping your head around the fact that learning can look very different, and needs to look very different for every kid, and every person, because we all are so different.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've been doing this podcast with my younger group that I've been working with this summer, and it's called the Social Changemaker Podcast. And we came up with a question that we want to ask everybody, because our focus, like you said, is to really, well, going back to your example of Seth talking about, who's going to save you and why didn't you put your name? It's all about recognizing your superpowers. And a lot of us have a difficult time doing that. So I ask everybody at the end of the interview, what is your superpower? You have many.
I'm good at expressing the urgency and the need. I think because I have feet in both worlds, the emerging future of work world and the education, I've been at it for 22 years world, that I'm good at expressing the urgency of what I see down the tracks.
Awesome. I would agree with that. So if people want to, listen to your podcast, or I don't know, you had a blog at one point? I don't know. Do you still blog? And
I do. I need to get back to doing it more. I am inundated with, we need a staff of 10 and I have 4. So,
yeah. Yeah. So we didn't talk about it. You've started up the Started Up Foundation,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And what is that?
We set up chapters all over. Actually, now we're in several states. We do events once a month. Now they're going to have to be digital for a while, but basically once a month, we have a deserving nonprofit that comes in and they do a reverse pitch competition. That is a way to say that the kids come there for the first 15 minutes. It's networking. Pizza and Pepsi is on us. They get to know one another, but then they hear from an opioid crisis center. They hear from a homeless shelter of, here's what we're working on. Here's what our problem is. And then the students go off in teams of 7 to 10 and they whiteboard and they create solutions. That gets them in the muscle memory of being able to create solutions instead of just taking to social media and telling me what is wrong. And then later in the year, we do actually it's the nation's biggest pitch competition. It's for the state only, the state I'm in Indiana. But the pitch competition is quite competitive, and it's the cash prizes are huge. It's $25,000 per kid per team, so up to a team of 3. And unfortunately, the last 2 years has been team of 3.
Oh, geez.
$75,000 payout. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. And it will be first held in Ottawa if it ever comes to Canada, for sure. We'll be in touch.
Hey, man, we'll talk. We'll talk. We've got a nice system down, and we've got a nice process down that creates an ecosystem of support and help, especially from local economic development groups all the way up top. So we'll talk about that.
Yes, for sure. So if people want to learn more about you, listen to your podcast, where do they find you?
Sure. Podcast is on everywhere podcasts can be found: Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, et cetera, et cetera. That is the Start Ed Up podcast. I'm probably more active on LinkedIn and on Twitter at Don Wettrick. And, we've got a Facebook page for the Start Ed Up Foundation as well, if you want to know more, or you can always go to startedupfoundation.org.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Don. I so appreciate having a good conversation with a great friend.
Awesome. I'm glad that we have maintained this friendship, and yeah, we get to learn from each other.
Awesome. Thanks.